Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Tide 10. I am Audrey Wang, a Managing Director of Consultant Relations at MacKay Shields, and I'm excited to have Chaunice Peebles from Angeles Investment Advisors join me today. MacKay Shields is a global asset management firm based in New York City with offices in LA, which is where I am, New Jersey, and London. We have about 135 billion in total assets and manage strategies across the fixed income and equity spectrum. Angeles is an independent, employee-owned, multi-asset investment firm providing customized solutions to institutional and private wealth clients. The firm is based in Santa Monica and also has a New York City office. Chaunice is the Director of Investor Relations at Angeles Investments, responsible for leading the strategic development of client relationships. She has worked as a consultant for OCIO clients at Makita Investment Group, where she served a variety of institutional client types. Prior to that, Chaunice worked on the team responsible for managing MIT's endowment. A very impressive background there, Chaunice.
Hi, Audrey. Thank you. Good to be chatting with you today.
Great to chat with you too. So first off, welcome to Santa Monica. We followed a pretty similar path, having switched coasts, and you actually recently moved to Santa Monica from San Diego to join Angeles. Unfortunately, that was right before we went into lockdown. So how have you been adjusting?
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting time to adjust. I feel like my first few weeks, I started in February, were kind of jam-packed with exploring everything Santa Monica has offered. And then it quickly slowed down in March. And now, all my favorite restaurants are based on takeout menus and getting used to taking, long walks around town. But I said, the adjustment is getting good. And on the work front, it actually feels more normal for me to be working in my home office than it does in the actual office. It's pretty normal to just kind of jump on Zoom, but I feel like I'm a little bit more connected than I would have been had I been traveling or, out on the road every week. So there's been some benefits.
That's how I feel too, and a lot of my other peers and colleagues. So the benefit of working from home. Well, I thought we could start off with some of your thoughts on the overall markets, just to begin our conversation. You actually recently hosted a webinar entitled Disconnect: How can markets be at all-time highs when the world around us is collapsing? Which is a great question. And I thought your CIO, Michael Rosen, had some pretty interesting insights. So can you talk about some of his thoughts and how that's translated into conversations with your clients and managers?
Sure. It's definitely the most frequent question I think asked is, how can markets be at all-time highs when we have all of, this going on, and this being the pandemic, historical unemployment, an upcoming election, the social unrest. How can we see this disconnect? And to put it succinctly, the conclusion was that it's not really disconnected. I think the saying goes, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So 2020 has been really unprecedented in a lot of the geopolitical and socioeconomic terms, but not really in terms of the way that markets react to these kind of events. The point I think that we made, and it's an hour-long webinar, but I think the point that we made is markets aren't driven by these events, but they're really driven by the underlying economic data. So, when we're talking to clients, we're talking to managers, we're talking to people, this is where we should be focusing our attention. And that's a much larger question, but where we're seeing maybe what markets are reacting to is the ability of companies to adapt to changing situations. How quickly can they pivot their business plans, their workforce to the situations that are going around? Markets are forward-looking, so they're quickly absorbing kind of the news cycle and looking forward. So as long-term investors, and with a horizon that is in some cases into perpetuity, one way that we've been thinking about navigating this, particularly in private investments, is to thinking about buckets or themes and identifying which industries won't be as affected by the day-to-day situations that change quite rapidly, and thinking of just like look at how technology has changed in the last couple of months and what implications does that have going forward, healthcare, biotech. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it, and Michael's kind of views on the market.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure it was helpful to your clients. And that leads me into my next question. So in this new normal, has your team found that you need to adjust your processes with clients or due diligence process with existing and new managers?
Yeah, good question. I think like most, we've transitioned to be completely over video, where prior to this we were maybe 90% of all meetings were done in person and 10% video. And video was kind of this new thing that, oh, wow, we could meet over video. And now it's everybody's over video. So the pandemic has really forced not just ours, but our clients and the industry's hand to make the technological jump. But I really think that it's been quite effective. We've been doing all of our client meetings over video, and they've been more frequent. Clients can kind of just jump on and have shorter, more frequent touch points. And in terms of diligence, we've been able to continue diligence with firms that we started, prior to COVID. So anybody that we had, a touch point with in the past 6 months, we've been able to implement strategies in the portfolio, based on that touch point and then carrying it out over video. What we haven't seen quite yet is the end-to-end cycle of diligence completely virtual, but that's more of a factor of the circumstance, that we just fortunately have not been in COVID long enough and been going through the pandemic long enough to see that. If you think about it, an average diligence cycle being 9 to 12 months, but if we continue to be this way, it's completely reasonable to think that we would have a virtual process through and through.
Sure. Well, hopefully we won't be able to see what exactly that looks like, but we'll see what the future holds. What are some of the opportunities that you are talking to your clients about right now, just as a result of the dislocation?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. Our clients have been pretty impacted by COVID. So Angela's institutional client base is primarily nonprofit clients. We're serving endowments and foundations, and they're seeing a lot of kind of unique struggles here, particularly educational clients with what are campuses going to do in the next month? Are they going to open? How do you serve your clients? So they're really focused on kind of the financial and operational challenges that are going to come to them. Same thing with our foundation clients on grant making needs and spending, and how are they going to serve their communities? So we serve as an outsourced CIO for a lot of these clients. And so we've been able to, take advantage of some of the dislocation pretty quickly and implement across portfolio. One thing in particular we're talking to clients about is private credit. And private credit was something that we started laying the groundwork for in 2019, started thinking about giving clients access to this opportunity. And, the first quarter, the dislocation in the credit markets just made that opportunity so much more attractive. So that's something that we were able to implement pretty quickly across all of our client portfolios.
Great. Well, thanks, Chaunice. Before we wrap up, I wanted to make sure that we spend some time on diversity and inclusion, which is a topic that you and I, both personally and professionally, feel strongly about. I know at MacKay, we've focused on diversity initiatives over the years, and we've made efforts to add diversity to our investment teams. But we certainly realize that we can and need to do more, and I think that's how a lot of other people in the industry feel. We've not only seen an increase in due diligence questions, but also more of a dialogue with consultants and clients. So what's your perspective on the issues, and do you have any recommendations for clients or managers on the issues?
Yeah, I agree. Similar to the comments you made, it's definitely something internally Angela has been working towards. But what I think we really saw in the past couple of months is we need to be focused on setting actionable and measurable goals. We talk about, and I'm sure most firms do, the diversity as part of our culture. Well, how do you measure that? And if you can measure it and monitor it, so you can improve it, and not just diversity. I think diversity goes into the left hand of it. If those are the numbers, those are how diverse is your workforce, but really making sure that you have the inclusion part of it. Now, does that diverse workforce feel that they are part of the team, that they are welcome, they are accepted, and that they're being treated equally? So I think one thing that we've, learned through kind of this recent reawakening in our industry of focusing on diversity is you really have to be able to monitor this. It's not enough to kind of just talk about it and say, we're working on it, but, what does that mean? So you mentioned the increase in due diligence questions. We certainly have put together for, our managers a questionnaire, but we're even looking at that. It's like, are these the right questions? It's not enough to know that, yes, we have policies in place to promote diversity. And that used to be kind of, okay, good that, you're working on it. But now it's kind of looking to making sure that these initiatives are being followed through and that they have some intentionality. We're talking about ownership, senior management, executive committee, that really some decision makers and senior positions. Are those positions being open to diverse candidates? And so we're collecting as much of that information as we can from our managers, and we're going to track it to see over time so we can see, where there has been progress and where there's not been progress. like I mentioned, our clients really hold us accountable in kind of the discretionary relationship to be asking these questions. So we've been really diligent on making sure we can get that information and really pressing people on it.
That's really helpful insight. And I appreciate your candidness, especially given that, it's a challenge that a lot of us are facing right now in the industry. So Chaunice, thanks so much for spending time with me. It was great to see you virtually, and hopefully we can do it in person sometime soon.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Audrey. Thank you so much for your questions.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.